Throughout the 1920s, Harlem experienced a cultural and intellectual explosion
Where is Harlem?
that became known as the Harlem Renaissance.
New York.
Who was involved in the Harlem Renaissance? What was the ultimate impact? Harlem is a neighborhood in New York City which has a very large African American community. Harlem became a destination for African Americans throughout the early 1900s as part of the Great Migration. As more blacks made Harlem their home, it increasingly became well known as an African American cultural center. Poets, writers, artists, musicians, and philosophers were all key parts of the movement. One of the key components of the Harlem Renaissance was music. Jazz performers including Jelly Roll Morton, Fats Waller, Duke Ellington, and Louis Armstrong perfected their music, which became very popular amongst white audiences. It was also during this era when the piano was incorporated into the jazz style of music. Traditionally, jazz bands had included primarily brass instruments. Intellectuals such as W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey argued and debated issues of racism, ethnic pride, and other topics related to African American life. Poets such as Langston Hughes introduced a new form of poetry known as jazz poetry. African American literature of the era included themes such as how slavery had impacted the African American culture and how to combat stereotypes of Black Americans. African American clothing also drastically changed during the Harlem Renaissance. Black men started wearing zoot suits. These were suits which featured long coats with padded shoulders and wide lapels. Women wore low-slung dresses, silk stockings, and open-toed slippers. Both genders wore hats with wide brims. Leopard skin items also became popular, as they were seen as a connection to traditional African garb. The Harlem Renaissance had a profound impact on the United States, as well as the world. African American artists, musicians, and writers began to be respected on an international level. Not only were white audiences listening to and enjoying Black music, but white composers and musicians began incorporating African American rhythms and harmonies into their own pieces. The Harlem Renaissance also helped to change the world's perception of African Americans. Prior to the 1920s, Blacks were thought of as uneducated farmers. However, thanks to the Harlem Renaissance, a new image of sophisticated and intellectual African Americans began to emerge.
Take 2 minutes, finish up your thought. Got 1 more minute, finish your thoughts. Amari, can you be better at that?
I didn't finish, but I said the role that jazz played was to combat stereotypes and tell people about how slippery he was. And I remember something.
Cormier?
Building once again, Sean, I said something like, the role that it played in African American culture was to show how slavery played a role for them during the Great Depression and how life was for them during the Great Depression.
Thoughts? Marquise?
I like to say that I like it was good and descriptive, but I also said I think jazz is important to African Americans because it changed the way of people that thought changed the way people thought of black people and also helped black people live off of something and it showed
Can you say that last part again?
and also it can hope it also it hope black people hope that they can start to live off something, and also it showed how blacks felt about slavery and how they actually feel about segregation.
So here's the thing. For something to impact a culture, to change the way that people are living, to change the way that people are thinking or acting, people have to feel connected to it first. In this case, what were African Americans feeling really connected to? Amari? Jazz music. And then that jazz music was making other people connect to them and relate to them and see them on a different level. They classified them as uneducated farmers. How many of you heard them say that? Right? We know that that's not what the African American population was like at the time. They were smart. They were talented. They had a lot to offer. And jazz gave them an opportunity to show this to the world. Okay? People had to feel connected, and they felt connected through jazz music. Just like today, music plays a big impact on our culture and the way we live lives. Right? You may listen to a song and think to yourself, wow, I have this huge connection to it. It makes me feel alive. It makes me think this or that. And it can change your thoughts. In the chapter we read last night, we learned that Bud started to really feel a connection to jazz music. And today we're going to talk about how jazz music affects the plot of our story. And how our story may have changed because of the way that Bud responded to jazz music. Go ahead and read our objective for us, please. All right, Miss Jayla.
Students will be able
Jayla, try again.
Students will be able to describe how characters respond and change as the plot progresses.
Can someone try that last word?
Progresses.
There you go. Progress as it progresses, as it continues on. Okay? You want to try it again? Progresses.
Students will be able to describe how characters respond and change as the plot progresses.
Good. I like how you reread the whole thing instead of just saying the word. Thank you for that, Jayla. So, today, we're going to be doing a little bit of reading together. And you can go ahead and check your computer a little bit more. We're going to hear about some instruments, and I wanted to make sure you guys knew what they were. Last night in your reading, you saw this, which is a what? What is that, Michaela? It's a drum set. And what is this specific gold round metal piece that they talked about? What is that called? Richard?
It's called and it makes a loud sound.
It does. What's it called though?
My brother has it.
Ah! Kakidina?
Is that set of steel drums?
Close. It's called a cymbal. Okay, the gold piece. I'm not sure if those are steel drums. I'm not that musically talented. But it is a cymbal, the gold piece, okay? Then we have a what, Jabril? Piano, beautiful, which we learned pianos came later to jazz music. I actually didn't know that until I saw that video, which was pretty cool. And lastly, we have a, Jamel? I think it's a horn. This shows how much I don't know about music, and that's why I was really learning, because when I was reading it, it might be a trumpet.
A trombone.
Is it trombone?
That's the French horn.
French horn. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure I know exactly what that is, because the reason I put pictures was when I was reading it, I like to be able to really visualize what I'm reading. And I'm like, wait, I don't know what that instrument is. So I had to Google it, and wanted to make sure you guys had a clear image of it as well. I'm not musically inclined. You've heard me sing. It's not beautiful. Okay? So, as we read together, go ahead and turn to chapter 17. As we read together, we are going to be looking to see how Bud responds to events and how he changes. I'm going to pick someone to read, not who has their hand up, but who's sitting up nice and straight. It's also crazy to think that we're almost done with our book so soon. All right. Miss Michaela, can you start us off?
I held them up so that it was floating on the top of the water in the bucket. I was pretending it was that underwater boat in the book Mama read to me. 20,000 leagues under the sea.
Amari.
Captain Nemo, I whispered, pretending I was a sailor. A sailor. Hey, matey, the squads were only able to plug 10,000 of the leaks we had. That means we have 10,000 left. And dadgum it. I think we're going down with all hands on board.
What's he doing right now? What's he doing? Layla?
He's cleaning, but he's playing on pirates.
Yeah, he's cleaning, but he's like playing pirates, okay? Interesting. I looked up to make sure no one was watching me too close. The dusky devastators of the Depression were still putting their instruments on the stage, waiting for Miss Thomas and Mr. Jimmy and Herman E. Calloway. Jayla.
I whispered, Heavenly Father, all is lost. Then I made the mop sink into the water, drowning Captain Nemo, Matey, and all the poor squabs. They went down with a bunch of bubbles and soap, suds, and dirt.
Jose.
I know Herman E. Calloway was trying to work me like a dog, but he wasn't. But he was going to really.
Try it again.
But he was doing a really bad job at it. I'd already wiped all the tables and chairs down in the log cabin, and now I was going back to clear mop the floor for the second time.
It was a piece of cake. The bucket even had a thing on top of that you could use to wring the mop out. And Herman E. Calloway didn't even know how much fun I was having. Making somebody work hard isn't as easy as it looks. Some folks are good at it, and some folks aren't. Nana.
Some folks can look at you and tell if you're even thinking about slacking off. They'll add some words to you faster than you can say, Jack Robinson. Some folks will find an excuse to strap you even if you're working as hard as you ever did in your life.
Deshaun.
I stuck the mop head in the rigger. I took it was somebody at a washing machine not paying attention to what he was doing and getting his whole body pulled through and wrung out. I left the handle up to see what was left of the poor soul, but before I could check, someone yelled out, 1, 2, 3. I looked up, the thug was brushing his sticks across the round gold metal thing next to his drums and was making it sound like his soft brain was connecting to a fall.
Commencing.
Or commencing to fall on someone's pyramid.
Stop for a second. He just described the noise a cymbal makes. Who can read that line again for me? I thought it was really beautifully written. I can actually hear it in my head. Go ahead, Ashana.
The thug was brushing his stick across the round gold metal thing next to his drum and making it
A little louder.
and making it sound like a soft rain was
Commencing.
commencing to fall on someone's tin roof.
Only instead of sounding like rain splashing anytime it wanted to, the thug had it sounding like it was coming down in a steady, bouncing way. Then, Dirty D started making the piano sound like it was kind of a drum. For a second, it fell right in with the rain pats that the thug was making. Then it took off and made you think of what Niagara Falls must sound like. It sounded like big, bright drops of water splashing up and over and up.